Coming up next, my chat with Bill King, so stay tuned in.
Welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by Bill King. Bill is a radio veteran, hosts his own show on Nashville Sports Radio. As we've been talking about this afternoon, we're devoting today's show to two of life's greatest pleasures, college football and the Super Bowl. So I'm very honored to welcome Bill to the show. Bill, thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you asking.
Since it's your first time, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where they can find your radio show.
Yeah, I've been doing this for about not quite 30 years. Started in the late 80s, degree in biochemistry, nowhere to go, nothing to do with it, so I got in radio. Maybe that's typical.
My dad's a chemist, too. My dad was a chemist as well.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah.
So I never did
anything.
I never did anything with it, but I had a degree, and then I decided I hated it, so went on into this after wandering around a year or two, and I've been doing it since, again, about 87, 88, so not quite 30 years. Just finished up with 10 years on SiriusXM College Sports Nation. Matter of fact, I basically invented that channel, the College Sports Talk Nation. And it was just me for about 6 years on that channel, nobody else, and then we started adding programming. So I spent 10 years there, and now I'm back doing local radio on 95.9 FM in Nashville. The big thing about that show is the streaming, because I don't do a local show. I may be locally, but it's not local in its content. And the future is all about, handheld devices and streaming and Periscope and all that stuff. So that's our focus, and we like it. It's fun. I'm having a blast.
Your show's fantastic, by the way. If you're listening out there and you haven't checked it out, do so. You're so knowledgeable, and I agree. That is definitely the future. And this show, it also has a more national flavor to it as well. Big week for football fans. National Signing Day on Tuesday, the Super Bowl this weekend. Are you an NFL fan?
No, not at all. Now, I'll watch it. I've got 7 kids, so, I don't have a choice.
You don't have time to do much of anything.
Yeah, I mean, talking about I can't quit working even if I didn't like radio, right? But, yeah, I mean, the Super Bowl will be on, and I'm a big Peyton Manning guy. I mean, I remember... I can tell you about a lot of these guys, just the recruiting, because he came out of Isidore Newman High School in New Orleans. I think his senior class was 93, and I remember that day I was driving to Memphis to do a speaking engagement, and we were waiting on his announcement. It was a big deal because he chose Tennessee, even though his dad was an Ole Miss guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big Peyton Manning shill. So yeah, I'll be. There's probably more interest there for me than typical, but no, on Sundays during the season, I'm watching Saturday film, and I'm controversial moments in the college game, maybe a bad call or a moment that was a tough play at the end of the game that was a game changer. My whole passion is the college football game, and I'd say 99% of it.
The way sports is today, the way coverage is, and just the whole cycle, it's very difficult to. You could cover all sports, and Teresa Walker locally in Nashville does a fantastic job of it. But it's extremely difficult to cover everything these days simply because of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and that wasn't my MO. I just kind of ended up in this situation. Through the years, when I started, again, late 80s, college football and college basketball were close to being equals. Okay, now again, I'd say 55-45, 60-40 college football, college basketball. And the NFL's always been the big kahuna. That's not new. It's just bigger and better every year, right? But my point is, through the years, I just kind of moved into this area. I realized my passion was this area, and I didn't want to do anything else. When the Titans got here, it wasn't disrespect to the Titans, but I didn't like the business side of it. It's not making money. It's just I just don't like Sundays with football. It's not nearly as much. So I'm in a very small minority. I understand, but I'm a college guy. And the other thing is, and I think I probably invented it, and that is there's no off season. In college football, there's no off season.
There's not.
Whether it's somebody getting arrested or whether it's signing day or whether it's attrition on a roster, there's always stories.
Yeah, you're right. You should follow your passion, right? I mean, if you're passionate about college sports, do that. If you're passionate about the NFL, do that. Life is so much easier and better when you're following your passion and your dreams. You talk about recruiting, and we're going to talk about National Signing Day. You mentioned Peyton Manning. It would be such a great story if he does win the Super Bowl this year and is able to go out possibly on his own terms.
Yeah, he's physically, obviously, with the eyes, not what he was. His arm strength isn't there. I know he had a 12-yard scramble, but he can't move around. Even by his limited pass, he can't move around well. It's going to take a fantastic defensive effort by Denver, which they have the ability to do. But I tell you, and I'm not gambling on this thing, but it's hard to pick against Cam Newton and the momentum and the energy they have.
Yep.
It's really difficult.
Yeah, they're rolling. They're a fantastic football team. Overall, probably the better football team.
Right.
You're right. Gary Kubiak, they're not going to be, Peyton's not going to be running very many bootlegs on Sunday. Let's just put it that way. So, it's kind of the big news today, this morning, percolating around before we talk about NSC and some of these other topics. Johnny Manziel, I know that you're familiar with him. Big name coming out of Texas A&M. It's a sad, sad story. What do you make of all of it?
Well, let me give you some background here. He comes out of a suburb of Houston. I had a lot of friends. I got friends in every state, college coaches, scouts, high school coaches. And he wasn't a huge recruiting name. He was big, but he wasn't the five-star guy. But he was a dual-threat run-pass guy, an incredible athlete, an incredible baseball player. He's one of those athletes that if you just went to your backyard and picked a random sport, he would be like the best guy there no matter where you went. He's
like Kyler Murray before Kyler Murray became Kyler Murray, right?
I'm telling you, he is something else. And let me give you the other misnomer about Johnny. And I've had two one-on-ones with him alone. One in Fort Lauderdale. That was around the Notre Dame-Alabama game. He'd won the Heisman. They brought him down for some sort of award. So I was doing my show down on Harbor Island, and he came down there, and I had him one-on-one. And then I had him again in Birmingham at the SEC meetings. And I'm telling you, anybody that thinks Johnny Manziel is this bumpkin from a little town outside of Houston, he is one of the smartest, most intelligent, well-spoken, eloquent people I have ever talked to. I am not kidding.
I would not have thought that.
Oh, I'm telling you, he is incredibly smart. Now, smart doesn't necessarily equal making good decisions, and obviously that's where we're going here with this. But I got to tell you, to me, it's not that easy. Everybody that had this knucklehead thing pinned on him from the beginning, which maybe they're right, I didn't feel that way. And I never bought into this is some, bad, out of control, hell-raising, carousing, boozing, can't get in. He is a very intelligent guy who is also a hell of a ball player. Now, this has gone too far for me to protect him, with my words here.
Right.
He's got some serious problems. If it's to the point where, ex-girlfriend's talking about getting hit by him, and he's still boozing it up, he's still carousing. Obviously, Cleveland's going to get rid of him. That's a whole different topic, but I just wanted to give you a different angle. He is not the stereotypical knucklehead, bonehead that everybody makes him out to be.
It is very interesting, and let me ask you this. Given all of that, you would think that he would be more protective and aware of perception and his public image.
I agree. I don't understand that. Now, obviously, or maybe he's not happy in Cleveland. I don't know, and I think his signing bonus was $4 million. I think he was guaranteed more than that. I don't have those numbers, but it was something like that. He comes from a fairly well-to-do family, too. So I don't know what he's thinking now. I mean, I really couldn't tell you. Obviously, whatever it is, it's out of control.
Yeah.
I will say this, and maybe this is going to be against the grain to the point where it's controversial, but I'm not sure he's a raging alcoholic. That's just, I don't know what he is. I'm not sure, but obviously he needs some help.
Yeah. Well, as they say, they're levels, right? And,
Correct.
And I'm familiar with addiction and addiction issues, and the
Right.
disabilities that they can cause. And, you don't have to be a raging alcoholic to be an addict and to have issues and to be unable to control yourself. There's
Right.
no doubt whatsoever about it. It's a sad, sad story. Interesting words from his father. But let's talk about National Signing Day. Let's talk about recruiting. Recruiting is a year-round business. National Signing Day is like Christmas for college football fans. Give us who, in your opinion, who won, who lost on NSD?
Well, I think it's your typical supermodels you're used to winning all the contests, right? I mean,
Right.
Alabama.
Oh, yeah, the big names. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama finished number one.
Mm-hmm.
Now the team that's ascending is Jim Harbaugh's Michigan program, and
they finished number 4. Mm-hmm.
I know everybody's talking about sleepovers and satellite camps, and I'm telling you, let me tell you something about Jim Harbaugh. He doesn't care what anybody thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, he'll go the opposite direction. I'll tell you the other thing about Jim Harbaugh. If he's playing your team and whoever, whatever team that might be, and he's up 52-2 at the end of the game, he'll score again. And then look at you like you got the problem, okay?
Well, I
mean,
love that about him. I love the guy. I do.
No,
I love him.
he is totally different, and he's going to rock the world up there. And Michigan, Ohio State is going to be wonderful for many years as long as we have him and Urban Meyer. Ohio State had a really good class. Florida State always has a fantastic class. LSU had a good class going into the day. Ole Miss is kind of a newcomer to this. The publicity did not hurt them about the investigation. So, I can give you 100 names, but those are some of the ones that stand.
Yeah, the one that stands out, and I'm looking at Rivals, there are different college football ranking systems out there for recruiting and other things. I'm looking at Rivals because that's the one that I'm the most familiar with. Clemson, we talk about Clemson a lot on this show because I'm a huge, huge fan of what Dabo Swinney is doing there. They came in at number 5. Talk about the fantastic job that he's doing at Clemson.
Dabo Swinney is one of those guys that everybody's always doubted from the very beginning. When Tommy Bowden got fired over there, and they just gave him the interim tag, which I don't think anybody expected that to stick. And now look where he's at. He's playing for championships. It's an amazing story, and they're really good at recruiting. They're underrated in recruiting, and not only on the Eastern Seaboard. And as you know,
Florida.
Clemson is connected. And Clemson is connected to Georgia. I mean, Athens, Georgia, and Clemson are right there, a couple tee shots from each other, seemingly. Yeah, but they go down to Florida, and they get players as well. Sammy Watkins came out of Florida. Now, Deshaun Watson, who's probably the best quarterback in college football, came out of Gainesville, Georgia.
I love him.
Yeah, they had him committed out of junior. But, he has done a wonderful job. And since we are both in Tennessee, there's a pretty good Tennessee connection there. His defensive guys, Marion Hobby played at Tennessee. He's a defensive line coach. Dan Brooks was a defensive line coach at Tennessee. And Woody McCorvey, who is one of the administrative guys with Dabo, was Dabo's coach at Alabama when he had the receiver job. And then Woody was at Tennessee later and is a good friend of mine. So I could go on and on with the list, but my point is they do very well, probably better than very well, and they're also very well coached, and that's probably a little underrated too.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. It's it's interesting because we do live in Tennessee, and we cover a lot of Tennessee sports. In fact, we're talking about Tennessee sports on today's show with the guys from Feels Like 98. Tennessee also had a great recruiting class. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But, Tennessee used to be known as wide receiver U. But I think Clemson might be stealing that title from them. They're doing a fantastic job of recruiting just electric, spectacular wide receivers there.
Wide receivers, skilled. Wayne Gallman is not going to be a superstar pro, but he was probably the most underrated running back in America this year. He had 1,600 yards. They had to fire a couple of years ago a good friend of mine who actually now is the Auburn defensive coordinator, Kevin Steele. It was after that West Virginia game where they gave up 77 points, and so Kevin had to go. Anyways, Brent Venables is there, and he's been there a couple of years. They have really picked it up defensively. They still have some weaknesses, but they're much better. And I'll tell you this, a year ago when Chad Morris left And I thought Chad Morris kind of saved the day for Clemson a couple of years ago with, coming in and helping out Taj Boyd and all that. When Chad Morris left, though, to take the SMU job, I thought that offense would struggle just because of his loss, and that did not happen. It did not happen at all. So, again, credit goes to Dabo and that staff.
Yeah, they didn't miss a beat. We're also talking on this show about Texas, the very strong finish, pun intended, by Charlie Strong. What was the most impressive thing about that to you?
Well, see, that's a game of mental volleyball with me. And let me explain what I mean by that. And it's kind of one of those paralysis through an over-analysis things for me, because Texas historically is massive state U, right?
Yeah.
And they ought to get the players. So I try and be careful. If good news comes, it's like, okay, it's still Texas. Now, what we're doing is we're juxtaposing that against the last couple of years, which we're talking end of Mac Brown and Charlie Strong, where offensively they've been awful, and that's been the side of the ball that's been their biggest problem. They're still not where they want to be defensively, but offensively they've just been godforsaken. So, having said that, and with all the momentum that we thought, air quotes there, we thought A&M had at the time, which is non-existent now with all those quarterbacks transferring, et cetera, it was trending heavily against Texas. And then A&M left that league to get the hell away from Texas because they cannot stand Texas. It's personal. So, it was trending against Texas. Now, this rally in recruiting was impressive. I've seen Texas have top 2 or 3 classes a million times in my life. So this isn't new, but I'll say it's relatively new considering the momentum that did not look like it was going in their direction. From that point of view, everybody who's buried Charlie Strong might need to rethink that.
Yeah, it is interesting, and you never know what's going on behind the scenes, and the rivalry between Texas and Texas A&M, between Kevin Sumlin. Texas A&M came in very respectable per rivals, right behind Tennessee, I believe at 14 or 15, somewhere in that vicinity. Kevin Sumlin's in an interesting situation. We talked about Johnny Manziel. How much do you think Kyler Murray and some of the other infamous incidents with his recruits has hurt him?
Hurt Kevin Sumlin badly. Yeah, I mean the quarterbacks leaving. I mean here is the way history typically goes. Quarterbacks have been transferring since the beginning of time because only one can play. Offensive line, you've got a bunch of them. Defensive backs, receivers, they usually don't transfer unless they're just never going to play no matter who else is there. But at quarterbacks know the depth chart. They know the other recruits, and they do not want to be the other guy. So every year you got a bunch of other guys, and they all transfer, right? And so that's not unusual. But see, the deal with A&M is they've had 2 quarterbacks who you could say were starters. Both those guys were starters, and both of them had a future there. Kyler Murray was sitting there with nobody else to even compete with. It was his job, and he still transferred. That is weird, it's different, and it's unusual, and it's damning to Kevin Sumlin.
Yeah, I agree with that. They say perception's reality. You said, guys transfer. But it seems to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that we are seeing far more movement among these young college players than we ever did before, more willingness to transfer out of a program than they ever did.
Years ago, there was a stigma attached that you can't transfer your problems. If you leave a place and you go to another one as a ball player, whatever problem you had, it's probably on you, and you're just relocating to whatever new campus that is, and you still got the problem. It's really not the case. It's really not the case anymore. There are lots of examples where guys transfer and have a total, career correction that is incredibly positive, and so you can't tell that anymore. Hey, don't run from your problems. Actually, people are running from them every day, and they're finding the light, if you know what I mean, and it's going well for a lot of them. So. Hey, you're right, and the trend is going to be even more significant as far as transfers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Tennessee, we're going to talk about them now. Tennessee's seeing some attrition as well, but Butch Jones still doing a fantastic job bringing in the Jimmies and Joes, as I like to say. How would you rate Butch Jones as a recruiter?
Very good. I mean, now the best guy they've ever had is Philip Fulmer and what they did. But I would say this guy is one of the best they've had. Now Lane Kiffin, they were doing fantastic.
Yeah.
They weren't there long enough to get anything done.
Yeah.
But no, I'd say Butch is doing a wonderful job recruiting. I said from the very beginning, when he started hiring his staff before he ever coached a game, that I did not like some of the assistants that he brought in. John Jancic was one of them, the defensive coordinator, and also Willie Martinez, who's the secondary coach there.
Yeah.
But Jancic's already been replaced. That happened about, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, whatever. I said from the beginning that would be a problem. They brought in Bob Shoop, which is a ridiculously good hire from Penn State, who'd been over here at Vanderbilt. I know Bob. They're going to be so much better, even defensively with him.
Good.
But here's the other thing. The recruiting's going well. They're able to sell that brand nationally for the most part. And the other thing is the Tennessee area, and let me be specific, the Middle Tennessee area, notably Williamson County, Rutherford County, has absolutely exploded with players like we've never had before. And
there were rumors that Jarrett Dooley ruined a lot of relationships with the university and a lot of high school coaches here in the state. How true was that?
Well, let me give you an example. We had Jalen Ramsey at Brentwood Academy, Jarrett Dooley last year. He's a top 5 pick in the draft coming up, okay? Not a top 5 defensive back. He's a top 5 overall pick. He is a defensive back superstar, also a superstar track athlete, which tells you about his overall athletic ability. I mean, Jarrett Dooley, no chance there. I think if Butch would have had much more time there, Florida State fans might want to, beg to differ, but I think Tennessee would have had a good chance to get it. Von Bell, that same class, who was over on the Georgia side of the Tennessee border, but lived in Tennessee, okay, so you could say a Tennessee guy, did not choose Tennessee, chose Ohio State. He just left early after his junior year. He'll be a pro. There's 2 guys right there that if you have stability, and Butch Jones had been there prior, I bet you they would be balls right now. Now, maybe they'd be turning pro right now, but you'd have 2 hellacious players you and I'd be talking about. Derek Dooley is one of the worst hires that Tennessee has ever made. He's a complete dope, and you couldn't have run his dumb butt out of there quicker. Derek Dooley got that job for one reason. He had a really good last name.
Yeah,
just like when Alabama hired Mike Shula. It just,
a great interview. And a great interview. The story goes, it was related to me. Tennessee had Kevin Sumlin. It was done. It was a done deal. And you can debate whether that would have been, the good move or not. But that was a done deal. Mike Hamilton wanted to do one more interview. He interviewed Derek Dooley and ended up hiring him. And we all know how that went. It's very interesting. We talked about the Jimmies and Joes. My only complaint with Butch Jones has been the X's and O's. I think that you had to let him grow into the program, get his players. What are the expectations for Tennessee in 2016?
Got to win the East.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't. I don't think you lay on them. You got to win the league because that's. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think you make a decision whether to keep somebody or fire them at Tennessee based on whether or not you just won the league. But you got to win the East for a number of reasons. Your roster is cycled up ideally for this next year, and let's face it, we don't even know who Florida and Georgia's quarterbacks are going to be. Now, I know who all the players are, but we don't know who's going to emerge there, and typically there's a growing period which involves losses when you have to go through that at Georgia and Florida. Those are the main competitors any random year.
Yeah.
So, not only is your roster right for the for the East this next year, but the rest of the league isn't. So if you blow this one, then I think there's going to be some significant controversy.
It's a perfect storm. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Georgia making the moves that they did. Even though LSU had a great recruiting class, there's still that lingering, what happened with, and I know, we're talking about the SEC in general, but still, Butch Jones has to win the East. I completely agree. He has to be better competitively overall in the Southeastern Conference. There's just no question. His SEC record is not terribly good right now. It's got to get better. They've got to close football games a lot better. They've got more talent. We'll see how that turns out. Is there a recruiting class out there that we haven't talked about, maybe a little underrated, or a sleeper class out there that you think fans should know about?
Boy, those questions are always tough for me because when your mind is in that world all the time, it's hard to differentiate, to sort them out. Let me think quickly here of a class or two. I'll say this, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, but Michigan State's never rated really high.
Yeah, the 20th.
And they are, and the 20th. I wasn't even looking, but which is pretty good. And they typically take their personnel and either develop it or overachieve with it. You can choose either term. I think better than anybody else. They really do. Now they'll get a Johnny 5-star guy here or there, but not nearly like Michigan will or Ohio State will, or teams down here in the South. There's a team that I always watch out for, just underrating a bit. Arkansas is typically underrated too, but you have to put that in context with, okay, are they really 6-6 or are they really 8-4? It's that kind of differentiation. They won't win the league, but usually their personnel is a little bit better than we think going into any random season.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. Coach Seahorn and I were talking about that yesterday with another team, and that's Houston. Speaking of Texas football, another team that, they don't get the big names, but boy, do they overachieve with what they do get.
They do, and that Houston area, I mean, the town of Houston, the city of Houston, is just loaded with ball players. And again, some of it has to do with the leadership, and obviously Coach Tom Herman has done a wonderful job there. The Ward kid at quarterback is not as well known, but is just, in this day and time of speed 'em up offenses, he's a killer. He is just fantastic, and they ended up getting one of the top defensive tackles in America too, which typically they wouldn't get there. That would either be Texas or Oklahoma or somebody like that going in there getting them. So, now again, the other issue with that, though, is a year or two from now, he won't be there. Somebody will buy him out of there. So.
Yeah, I don't know how long he'll be there either. It's interesting. Yeah. Before you get out of here, for those listening out there, wannabes who would like to break into the radio business, what advice would you give them?
Well, it depends on where you want to go, but here's what I would do. I would, first of all, absorb all information that you can. Just become very fluent and eloquent in anything that you have interest in, all sports, if that's the case, whatever it might be, and take any job you're given. Don't be choosy because you need repetitions. If you're going to be a wide receiver, you need to be out there running routes. If you're going to be in radio, you need your reps. And what you do your first day or week or month isn't going to be the way you're going to be in 5 years. You look back and hear those tapes, you go, oh God, can we turn that off now? I don't want to hear that, So
I know.
I was told, and again, I had no background in this at all, how bad my voice sucked, how bad everything sucked, and then later years they were telling me I had one of the best voices anybody ever heard. So you never know. It's just, but I would say,
you got to be yourself too, right? I mean, don't try to be somebody you're not.
Correct. Don't copy any play-by-play guy because you're just going to make a fool out of yourself. Have people trying to copy you. I mean, that's be you, and then maybe people try and mimic you. That's what to do because you can't be somebody else. I mean, I've grown up and I know Paul Feinbaum well. If I went on the air and started doing that show, you'd say it's foolish. It's not you. You're not doing it, and you're screaming at people, and that's not really what you do every day. So it's just you got to be you. But I'd say don't turn down, even if it's some little rinky-dink thing that you think is no count or whatever. Do it for the reps. Get all the work you can get, and then eventually, I can't give you the time, but eventually, if you really want to do this, you'll do it.
Yes. Great stuff. Bill, thanks again so much for joining me. Tell everybody once again out there where they can find you on social media and find your radio show.
Best thing to do, here's one way. Go to Twitter at Bill is King, and that will tell you everything you need to know. Bank accounts, Social Security numbers, it's all right there for you.
One of the best Twitter names out there. Great stuff. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.